America. This is America. This is America, and most of you watching this, statistically, from our YouTube analytics, you're in America also. So we welcome all the Americans, but we welcome all the foreigners. If you're a foreigner and you watch this, if you're in Europe, or if you're in Asia, or if you're in, probably don't let you watch this in China. Some places, North Korea, probably not a big viewership in North Korea, but for those of you that can watch this, we do welcome you. And the subject matter of today's video is going to be this guy right here, which is a AK from a company called Occam Defense. I'm trying to, figure out what to do with my legs here. I got a chair. So this AK-47 is from Occam Defense, and it's very fascinating. It's one of the first AKs in quite a while that I've seen that is actually different, and it's unique, and it has some really interesting stuff going on. So this will be a full breakdown on this, and yeah, that's the deal. So before we jump all into the, and you've probably heard me say this in other videos, everyone, but if you're like, why is his hand mangled like it went through a meat grinder? Because a steel plate dropped right on the hand today, and it actually cracked a fingernail in half. It's a good time, everyone. So if you see me shooting a little janky in some of these videos from this little collection that we've got right here, that's why. We do thank you. Subscribe to the channel if you're not. We are pushing towards 50,000 subscribers. Really excited about that. And yeah, if you need help, our day job, the business behind all the content, is actually a real estate business for people like you. If you watch this, you're our kind of clientele. We'll help anyone, help your grandma, help your Tinder hookups, but we're kind of geared at mill, LE, hunter shooters, stuff like that. So there's that, and we've got Patreon. That'll be linked below if you guys feel like donating. It does make a difference to us. We do not get paid by any companies or have any sponsors, so your donations matter. That way we can keep this thing honest and as ruthless as we possibly can. And that's pretty much it. Anything else you need to know is down in the video description. So Occam Defense, just kind of cover some basics here. So they're based out of Idaho, and I do know them a little bit. I met Brian, the owner of Occam Defense, at a gun show locally here, probably 2 years ago now. And at that time, I don't even really think that they were building guns yet. I think they were still kind of in that testing and evaluation and prototyping type phase. But a couple years after that, they've got complete guns. They're shipping guns, actually shipping them pretty quick in terms of their lead time. We'll talk about that. But it's fascinating. So anyway, I hit up Brian, the owner over there, and I just said, hey, look, I'd really love to do a review. I've wanted to do this for a while, and we finally got it done. So they sent in the gun for the review. The gun's just here on loan. So the first thing that I think is relevant for this conversation, and you're going to start to get what I mean here in a minute, but is for me to introduce myself. And my name is Jake Dwyer, and most of you have probably rarely heard my first name and definitely never heard my last name, because you just know me as the devil's child or whatever you like to call me in the comments. But my name is actually Jake Dwyer, and why that's significant is because I am not a physicist, but Brian at Occam Defense is. And when you talk to him and you try to learn about his guns, it's very apparent that he's a scientist, because most of the things that he told me about, we had about an hour-and-a-half call a week ago leading into this review after I'd shot it and gotten some, some of my opinion formed. And about 10% of the hour-and-a-half call I understood. And about, the overwhelming majority, he would say something, and I would say, Brian, I'm an idiot, and I need you to put that into idiot terms, because I'm here to tell a story of your gun, and this is not a science channel, contrary to popular belief. So Brian, just to give you a sense for the kind of the science thing, he made what I thought was a very fascinating point, which he goes, look, a lot of people, especially in the AK world, and I would agree with this statement here, they want their guns to have a personality. And I agree with that. I've always kind of equated AKs to like classic muscle cars versus these modern clinical cars. You take a McLaren or something, and you're like, man, it's a scientific wonder, but it doesn't have any personality. So Brian made an interesting statement. He goes, I don't want my guns to have personality. He goes, I want them to have predictability and repeatability. And I was like, that's a fascinating thing. I've never heard a gun maker say, because everyone likes to have a little bit of their personal flair in their guns. He doesn't. He wants something that's scientifically the best thing that he could come up with. So this gun, what it is, it's Brian's take on what a modern defensive fighting rifle in the platform of an AK-47 should be. And it's quite fascinating, some of the stuff that he's done. So I'm just going to hit you with a couple basics, but we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about some of the things that are unique to the gun. So we've got a 16-inch gun here. He does have a, I believe it's an 10.5. I think it's a 10.5 that he does as a pistol. So there is that as well. But this is pin and welded with a dead air muzzle device, and yeah, it's in 7.62 by 39, right? So standard AK-47 round. Now, let's get into some of the unique stuff here. Let's start with the stock. The stock is quite fascinating. So you will notice that it is it's a side folder, okay? If you don't shoot a lot of AKs, yes, you could keep shooting the gun from this position, unlike an AR where you'll get a round off and then you're gonna have to clear the round out in order to start shooting with your stock folded over, okay? So AK, obviously you can shoot like this, but you've got a side folding design. What is, and if you see me flinch at all, everyone, it's because I basically have a broken finger at the moment. So he's got this side folding design, and it's a really nice stock. So they cut this out of billet. I think it's aluminum. Let me double check that. Billet aluminum, yes. And a couple of things that are interesting about it. So one, he's got multiple QD mounts. So he's got one here, we've got one here, and then we've got one right here. So when I first looked at this, I was like, are those QD slots or no? I can't tell. I could tell that the ones up here were. Couldn't tell about these. Yes, these are multiple different versions of, or not versions, just different locations for QD slots for a sling. I originally was clipping in my sling up here because that's kind of where it would fall on an AR, and then clipping in the other sling over here. As it turns out, this section that I didn't think was going to be super great to run is actually a very nice location for a sling, and it somehow it drapes the gun very, very nicely. These are small points, but if you run your guns a lot and you're running them with slings, you know that the placement of those slings is going to wind up being pretty critical. So very nice design on that. Probably the most interesting thing about this is the rear end of it. So the rear end of it is actually running on the same exact system that SIG does on the MCXs. And I thought this was phenomenal. I was like, oh shit. So basically you've got like a little pick rail that's at the back of the receiver here. And then the, little SIG kind of hinge system here goes on. So why that's unique and why I love it is because you've got a lot of different stock options that you can run on this gun. So anything that you could run on an MCX on the same system here, you could run on this. So you could run those little pencil stocks. You could do a lot of different stuff. That's fascinating. Like, I was like, man, what a great forward-thinking design, because that's one of the benefits of AK is that you can actually do something like this. Maybe other AK guys do that. I don't know. I'm certainly not aware of any, but fantastic design. So that's the stock. Probably the biggest hallmark feature of this gun is going to be the handguard. The handguard is a whole system that's going to require a few minutes here to go through. But in order to appreciate and make sense of this, you have to kind of compare it to what is it going up against. So this would be largely the norm for AKs, and this is a Rifle Dynamics, I can't remember the model, it's 70 whatever. AK-47 from Rifle Dynamics. Great gun. So none of this is meant as a knock on this gun, but we're just going to use it to illustrate a couple things here. This is what you would traditionally see, something like a polymer handguard here that, for one, you can't attach anything to, so what it's primarily doing is just keeping heat off of you, right? So it's just designed, hey, not for accessories, just keep the heat down. And then if you are someone that's not gonna run your AK slick with just iron sights, but you do want to mount things, you would typically have an Ultimac rail like this. So here's the pros and the cons. The pros is, well, I can have classic handguard, but now at least I can attach optic light, and in this case, you'll see on mine, a sling attach up front so I can clip in a QD. This rail is maxed out now, okay? So Ultimacs are good. It's something that's used on a lot of AKs. The problems, though, would be this. They get very hot, and it doesn't really matter what the AK is. You're never going to get around the heat issue. I think Brian would probably appreciate me saying, well, that's just physics, everybody. I don't know. I don't even know if that is just physics, but I don't know. It gets fucking hot, right? So they get super hot. So if you're running AKs, one, you're going to want to run a glove on your support hand. For most of you, that would be your lefty, or my mangled hand from whatever got a hold of it earlier. So you're going to want to run a glove because of the heat, because hey, especially if you're used to going like thumb over bore thing, obviously you're not going to do that on an AK, but sometimes your thumb has a tendency to creep up. It is going to get scorched mighty quick. You're going to have your optic that is going to need to be capable of standing up to some abuse because of that heat that's going to be coming off of the handguard, because hey, again, a lot of that heat's going to be coming from this barrel right underneath it. You can get a light, but you're going to have some limits in terms of how you can run your light, and you know, that's that. So one other challenge that this presents is your optic is way, for the AR users out there, which, let's face it, is the majority of people, your optic is going to be way forward from where you're used to running it. So whereas on most ARs, your optic's going to be, let's say, roughly here, hey, we got damn near, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 inches that it's further forward now. Does that really impact anything? For me, no, but I run AKs a fair bit, so it just doesn't matter. If you're an AR user, maybe it matters to you. To me, it don't matter. So what Brian over at Occam did, he kind of fixed a lot of the problems with AKs. So you have more of a chassis system here, okay? And he calls this the Merc, the Merc. I don't know what the Merc stands for. It's the Merc. Billet, aluminum, that's how it starts out in life, and then they mold it into this bad boy right here. And this is free floated for those of you that care about that. But hey, enough with that. Let's talk about some of the interesting features here, which is, look, it's more of a chassis system. So if you were to back out these little, you know, pins, screws, whatever back here and take this off, this whole thing is just going to slide off, including all the way back to the optic. So this whole chassis system is going to go all the way to just behind this rear sight here, all the way obviously to the front of the handguard. It's going to accomplish a lot of different things from you. All right, here's a Quest chip that just dislodged from a tooth. Sorry, everyone. First things first, I can place my optic more in line with where I'm used to running it from an AR user's perspective. So my optic is going to be at a very intuitive position. And for those of you, just so I can save myself the hassle of this, if everyone's seeing this right on optic, it's not my optic. They sent it with the gun. So no, this is not mine. I don't own it. This is not a review on that. I don't really have much opinion on it other than the fact that the dot at its brightest setting is not really that bright. So whatever, I guess there goes our right on sponsorship. But I know they pay a lot of people, so you hear a lot of positive things about them. Neither here nor there. So the optic's going to be in line with where it would be for an AR user. That's cool. Obviously you can mount your iron sights, and you could do a lot of different types of iron sights. These are pretty unique because this rear sight, which is by them, has a bunch of different diopters. So basically, hey, look, you can rotate this bad boy around to find the right size hole for you, right? And I think based on you and your mechanics, you'll find the right size hole that you prefer. You know, just do your thing. So we got the optic, we've got the irons. One other thing that's going to do is it's going to take the optic away from the main heat source, right? Which is going to be up here by the barrel. So that's good, because you could, if you wanted, run a less durable optic per, you know, and it's probably not going to suffer from some of those potential heat problems that an Ultimac rail could. That said, the SIG optic that I've had on that RD gun, never had an issue with it once, nor have my MROs, which run on my other MROs are on my other AKs. None of them ever had any issues. So there's that. Let's keep moving. So obviously the hallmark's going to be that you've got a lot of M-lock here to work with. So you can mount lights now, not just on your top, which is what I have done in this case. What I ask everyone to keep in mind, this is not my gun. I'm just borrowing this. So, hey, look, look, straight up, I don't have the budget to go buy hardware and everything for every review gun that comes in. Sometimes you got to go, look, I have this set up because I can kind of universally run it on all the guns. If it was mine, I would probably move it to one of the actual M-lock slots and get the proper mount. But hey, look, obviously you can run lights or lasers, whatever cool guy stuff you want, vertical grips on the M-lock, and that's fantastic, okay? And obviously with traditional handguards, that's not really going to be an option. One other thing that it's going to allow you to do is, and actually one note on that. So on the handguard, this would probably be, yeah, I guess we put it in the cons category. It's not a big deal to me, but this M-lock that's going to be up here, kind of at that 45 offset location, you're really not, you know, like when I put an offset mount on this M-lock slot for this light, because I did have one, the shape of the handguard doesn't really work if you're going to run this slot with a 45 offset mount so that the light would wind up kind of in this little channel here. The Arasaka mount didn't quite fit. Is it a big deal? No, not really, because I can run the light up top. I can run it at the 3 or the 9. So it really doesn't matter to me, but just, hey, kind of food for thought. So there's that. I think another advantage to this, and I look at this as a gun that I think, hey, look, for a lot of AR users, you have a resistance to getting into AKs because it's just a different manual of arms and the way you have to mount shit and yada, yada, right? And you're just resistant because it's too different for you. I think this checks a lot of the boxes against, or, you know, around that. On traditional AKs, obviously your support hand's going to be more back here, right? So that's how you're going to be shooting it. Whereas an AR, you're used to probably extending a little further out if you're running a kind of a modern, you know, C-clamp grip or something like that. Now you can do that. Now I can use my existing grip that I'm used to running on an AR. And per how I would run my grip, cool, no problem. I can just thumb the light from that position. So you can run a forward grip, which is great. You can attach accessories, which is great, but there's more. Okay, there's more. Now we get into the science shit, and you can see how much I love teaching you guys about science. So inside of this, we will show you some B-roll now because there's no sense for me to just point a barrel at everyone here. So inside of this, you have a heat shield, and that heat shield also billet from aluminum or titanium or some shit, whatever. It's a heat shield is what it is. And it basically is going to sandwich the barrel. That's going to do a couple of things. One, obviously act to, if there was no heat shield and it's just barrel M-lock, this thing's gonna get hot very, very untouchably hot very quickly, especially if you're running a suppressor, right? So that heat shield is gonna dissipate some of that heat. Is it gonna dissipate all the heat? No. This is a gun that, hey, after, I'd say if you run 3 mags, you know, 2-3 mags in like fairly quick succession, you're gonna definitely want a glove. Like even after a couple mags, hey, you're definitely gonna want a glove on this. So you're not gonna get around all the heat issues, but this is gonna be better than obviously if it didn't have that heat shield. Is it gonna get hot? Yes, that would probably be one of the weak points of the gun, is just the fact that, hey, look, it is gonna get hot. But again, I brought that up to Brian, even for the owner of Occam. I just said, hey, look, so it does get hot. Like, I mean, the heat shield is not impervious to heat. And he's like, no, physics is physics. It's still gonna get hot. It's just, this is gonna be a better version of it. So it is gonna help reduce some heat, but also the way it's designed, and I thought that this was really fascinating, it's designed to help with accuracy. So the way that this thing essentially, I need you to think of it like a barrel bushing on a 1911 or like an O-ring on a Mark 23 barrel, where essentially it's gonna sandwich that barrel and it's gonna make it really tight, right? So that you're gonna get tight groups. That's kind of what this heat shield and the way it's operating does. So there's a pin that's back here, and basically what's happening, it's like a little kind of screw rivet, if you will, that's going through the heat shield into the hand guard, and then that's going to kind of like sandwich the barrel in place. I'm doing a bad job of describing it, but what it's doing is essentially it's locking all this stuff down so that you're going to get really tight groups with this gun. So Brian told me, hey, look, 2 MOA is the worst that they will accept of any of their guns that go out the door. And they do test fire all their stuff for accuracy. I believe, if I'm remembering right, he even told me they send the target that they shoot kind of like you do with pistols, which is really quite cool and totally uncommon with rifles, especially AKs. So you do get, you know, when you're talking sub MOA with a AK, I asked him, I was essentially like, for real? Like, that sounds pretty crazy. And he's like, yes, but keep in mind, that's under perfect conditions. The ammo uses is Wolf Polyformance, something I'm not aware of, but I guess, you know, for accuracy on AKs, that's what you want. So he said, hey, look, under perfect conditions, most of these guns are gonna go sub MOA, but 2 MOA is the absolute worst that they can do before we will ship them. That's cool. So look, this is a pretty versatile piece of hardware, right? It allows you to do a lot of things that you can't traditionally do with AKs. The problems, hey, look, one, it's gonna get hot. The heat shield, it's basically shaped like a chimney, and you'll see at the top of this, like right in here, it's open. So it's designed to be like a chimney to funnel the heat up. It does a pretty good job of it, but again, hey, it's gonna get hot and there's no way around that. Do you have multiple QD locations on each side of the gun? So right there, and then right there. Where do you wanna run it? Up to you, you know, kind of dealer's choice. You run it however you want. Let's talk about the gassing. So the gun is gassed really nice. It is a really, really nicely gassed AK. It doesn't have a K&S adjustable piston in it, but it is really nice. So they come suppressor tuned, but also running good unsuppressed. So he kind of finds that sweet spot, in my opinion. Most of the case, for those of you that don't know, if you shoot them with a suppressor on it, you're gonna be like, well, you don't wanna do that very much. You're just sucking in gas from the ejection port, especially if you're a lefty. Have a good time with that. So his runs great unsuppressed, runs great suppressed. So, I mean, almost uncommonly so, the suppressor really takes a lot of that recoil out. Like, I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's not it's a snappy gun because of the caliber that it's shooting, but it's not snappy for an AK. It's just a smooth shooting AK, but with a suppressor on it, shoots really, really nice. Pretty soft for an AK. A benefit, and I've pointed this out in multiple other videos, I think with Type A, this was kind of one of my hallmark points on that gun, which is there's a sweet spot of when you want to buy from smaller boutique companies like this, because there's a time when you catch them when you can still get to the get to the people that make them and make special requests and stuff like that. That's the case with Occam. They're still in that phase. So Brian told me they've had a few customers in Alaska. I think he said 3 customers in Alaska that have ordered guns. So they tune those guns a little heavier on the gas. That way it can function in all those like super insane, crazy weather conditions and frigid cold that they get up in Alaska. Hey, it's a small point, but you go, that shows you guys care. It shows that you guys are paying attention, and I like that. Couple of just kind of random quick hit list points for you guys. The gun is not built from a parts kit, so Occam is basically individually sourcing parts, kind of onesie twosie things. And I don't feel one way or another about that. It sounds like a lot more work for them, but parts kits are tough to get right now. So this does create more work for them, but you're probably gonna get a better product from that, because again, they're gonna make sure all those individual parts go together. Tango down stippled grip. It's nice. They do the stipple in-house at Occam. It's nice. It's a very nice, it's kind of in that perfect sweet spot for grip texture. ALG enhanced trigger. I'm pretty neutral on ALG triggers. I've had some that have just not done well in guns over time. Some people love them. It's just, the trigger pull's very nice, so it's a very nice feeling trigger, but I've had issues with once, specifically in that Rifle Dynamics gun, where it's like, that trigger did not do well over time. Iron sights made by Occam, we talked about that. They are also, FYI, clearly mounted to the sort of rigid chassis system, so you will get some more accuracy out of those irons. As mentioned, they do have a 10.5 version as well. They will make their guns California compliant, and that's kind of cool that they even list that on the site, because there's so many gun companies that are like, nah, we're not going to deal with that. Fortunately, on rifles, you can make your gun California compliant, unlike pistols where you're just kind of screwed if you're not on the list over there. Lead time 4 to 6 weeks. That's really good for like a real sort of custom fit made product like this. 4 to 6 weeks is completely acceptable in my opinion. Cons, I mean, we talked about the handguard and the heat a little bit. That's not a major problem. That's just the way AKs are going to run. The only other thing I would say is, hey, price. So they are going to be premium tier price. So these are running $3 grand. There's a couple of options that, hey, depending on what you pick between like safety or stock or whatever it is, just a couple little small things, you could fluctuate your price upwards of a couple $100, nothing major, but you are dealing with a $3,000 AK-47, and that's a very premium priced AK. Now, Brian will be the first to tell you he wants that price to come down. That price was lower. I think it was closer to, don't quote me, but mid 2000s. And what happened, of course, in the era of COVID, especially for a smaller shop, a lot of smaller shops had this issue where they simply couldn't source parts, and the cost of parts was going up, and they didn't have the sort of influence as a smaller shop to just keep keep everything flowing as normal. So their price is higher than they want it to be right now. It should come down over the course of time as parts and everything become more available. Do I think it's a very, very good gun? And this is sort of final thoughts here, but look, I think it's a very, very good gun. You've got a real sort of craftsmanship level AK here with some very innovative stuff, and it's not real easy to innovate on AKs. You can make good AKs, but it's tough to innovate on AKs. So I really give Brian a lot of props for that. It's a good product. Would I buy it with my own money? Yes, I 100% would. I'd have no reservation about throwing $3 grand at this. I'd flinch a little at $3 grand, but I would go, well, it's a good AK, so, just suck it up, big guy. again, this is his take on a modern fighting defensive AK rifle. And I happen to know, just for what it's worth, I won't call him by name, but I do know that he consulted with a friend of mine who is a long time in the special operations world and like very respected guy inside of that community. And he was primarily in all through GWAT and all of his time overseas and everything, ran AKs. He was like the AK guy inside of his teams and everything. So I did know, that consulting happened, which makes you feel good to know that the science guys consulting with warfighter guys to bring you sort of the ultimate, defensive fighting AK-47. So yes, it's a premium tier AK. I 100% think it's right up there with the Meridians and the Rifle Dynamics and the, name the top tier AK company. I think this is right up there with that. So, hey, take that for what it's worth. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Good gun, would recommend. And yeah, we'll see you soon.